I am Angela, a 24-year-old office worker. I live with my parents and my younger sister, Sophie, in our family home. My father works for a large corporation, and my mother is a housewife. Ever since I began to understand things, we've lived in a newly built house, so we might have appeared to be a privileged household. In fact, until I entered high school, we had a close-knit family and a happy life. However, due to a certain incident, I began to be treated terribly by my family. It was the high school entrance exams. My parents wanted me to get into a competitive school, but I couldn't meet their expectations. Since then, their attitude towards me has drastically changed. They insisted that, now that I was in high school, I should handle more household chores, so I was tasked with cooking dinner, doing the laundry, and shopping for groceries. Because of this, I had little time to study, and when my test scores were not good enough, they called me a terrible child. However, my 2 years younger sister, who got into a competitive school as my mother hoped, wasn't tasked with any household chores. Even if her test scores were poor, she was comforted and told to do better next time, and taken to movies and shopping for a change of pace. I was starving for my parents' love, so I tried my best with both my studies and helping around the house in hopes of getting their attention. However, despite my efforts, I failed to get a result, perhaps because of my clumsiness, and in the end, I was berated, being called useless by my entire family, which left me feeling bitter. On the other hand, my excellent sister was increasingly doted on by our parents, and the gap between my sister and I only widened. Even after I became a working adult, my parents' attitudes remained unchanged, and if anything, they became even colder towards me than before. I know the reason for this. When I started job hunting, my mother suggested that I apply to a company owned by relatives, but I refused. This was because I had already decided on the job I wanted to do, and I had narrowed down the companies I wanted to apply to. The company my mother introduced me to was fairly well known locally, and it didn't seem like there was a risk of it going under. However, it didn't accord with what I wanted to do. So, I did my job hunting by myself without using my mother's connections. Although I received a job offer successfully, my mother didn't find that amusing. She didn't speak to me for a while after that. Since my father always saw what mood my mother was in, he joined her in criticizing me. Meanwhile, my sister followed my mother's advice and used her connections to get a job at the relative's company.
Sophie is such a good girl, unlike Angela.
Sophie truly is a good daughter. Unlike someone else.
My parents' attitude towards me only got harsher. As I became busier with my job, I gradually stopped caring about the harsh treatment from my family. My work was enjoyable and fulfilling, and no matter how coldly my parents treated me, I was glad I had stood by my own decisions. While my salary wasn't high, I managed to save money by living economically, and I was starting to think about moving out of my parents' house and living on my own. It was around this time that something happened. My mother made an unexpected suggestion.
I've been thinking, maybe we should go on a family trip.
A family trip?
Sophie has settled into her job, so what do you think?
It's been a while since we went on one, so why not?
I want to go on a trip. Where are we going?
Actually, I've already decided on the destination. I want to stay at the Moon Hotel. So, how about Chicago?
The Moon Hotel. Isn't that the super luxurious hotel owned by the daughter of our company's president? I really want to go.
Sounds great.
It seemed my father and sister were fully on board with my mother's suggestion, but honestly, I wasn't too keen on it. Knowing how nasty my family could be, I was sure they would treat me like a nuisance even during the trip. However, everyone else looked excited about going, and they started researching tourist spots in Chicago.
Angela, what do you think?
Huh?
Do you have any recommendations for tourist spots in Chicago?
I was surprised because I didn't expect her to actually ask me for my opinion. At the same time, though I couldn't help but think how easily swayed I am, I started to feel like it might be okay to go on a family trip. Since I'd be moving out soon, I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to go out with my family one last time. The travel dates were set, and I told my boss that I would be going on a trip with my family and requested a few days of paid leave. I was tasked with arranging the flights and accommodations. I thought my mother, who was a housewife and had plenty of free time, should do it, but she didn't want to deal with the hassle and pushed the responsibility onto me. I was used to this kind of situation, so I quickly booked the flight tickets and hotel. On the day of the trip, as I was about to leave the house, a taxi had arrived, and my mother called out to me.
Angela, wait.
What?
Why are you coming with us, Angela? You're staying home.
Huh, staying home. My father forcibly took my traveling bag from my hands and threw it onto the living room floor. I was stunned at the sudden occurrence. When I looked at my father and sister, they both were laughing and loading their luggage into the taxi. It was then that I finally realized. They had been all in on it from the beginning. I was never included in their definition of family from the start. It boiled my blood. How much more would they mock me? That was when I had second thoughts. Perhaps this could be an opportunity. Then, I won't go.
Oh? You're surprisingly obedient.
My mother was surprised that I didn't complain at all.
Unusually compliant, aren't you? Don't mess up the house while we're gone.
Well then, Angela. Take care of the house.
With those words, they each slung their bags over their shoulders and left the house. I stared blankly at the taxi driving away. In my mind, I whispered, "Just you wait and see." About 8 hours later, I got a call from my mother as I expected.
Angela. What on earth is going on?
What do you mean?
When we tried to check into the hotel, they said the payment hadn't been made yet?
Then I calmly replied to my mother, yelling hysterically. Well, of course. I booked it for pay on arrival.
But Moon Hotel doesn't accept pay on arrival, does they?
Well, generally, no. But because we're relatives, they made an exception for us. That's right. When I arranged the hotel, I booked it for pay on arrival. This was because I had no guarantee that my parents or sister would repay me later if I paid the money for the hotel and flight up front. As I had been concerned, they never intended to pay the cost. I could feel their panic over the phone. While I had to pay for the flight in advance, opting for pay on arrival for the hotel, leveraging the connection as relatives, turned out to be a smart move. My parents and sister, who had assumed that I had already taken care of the payment, must have been quite flustered when they were asked to settle the accommodation fees at the front desk.
Why didn't you pay in advance? I don't have money for the hotel.
Of course, if I had gone, I would have paid on arrival. But it was you who decided to leave me behind, right? You should figure it out yourselves.
Then you should have told us.
I never thought I would be left behind like this. It can't be helped. If you can't afford the hotel, why don't you sleep around there? With that, I ended the call. It must have been quite humiliating for our family, who were so concerned about appearances, to cause such a fuss at a hotel owned by a relative and managed by the daughter of my sister's company president, simply because they couldn't pay. As I left the house that had been my home for 24 years, I couldn't help but feel the corners of my mouth twitching with suppressed laughter. Initially, my revenge was meant to end here. However, it took an unexpected turn. The panic and commotion caused by my parents and sister at the Moon Hotel were far worse than I had imagined. According to what I heard later through relatives, my parents and sister kept negotiating at the front desk for a while, trying to see if they could lower the bill for my portion since I wasn't there. Of course, same-day cancellations weren't accepted, and eventually, my father ended up paying the full amount with his card. The scene of my family shouting over the phone, demanding to know why the bill wasn't settled, and then pleading for a reduction in the fees for one person, must have caused quite a stir in a luxury hotel. Furthermore, Moon Hotel typically operates on a strict reservation-only policy and doesn't usually accept pay on arrival. It was only because we were relatives that they made an exception for us. However, despite this special arrangement, my parents' outrageous behavior left a strong negative impression on the management of Moon Hotel. Naturally, this incident reached the ears of my sister's company president through their daughter, who was the manager of Moon Hotel. As a result, my sister, who had already secured her position through connections, found herself in a worse position within the company. Now, it seems that her chance of career advancement is utterly hopeless. My sister, whose treatment at work visibly deteriorated, lashed out at our mother, who had recommended the job through connections. This rebellion from my sister, who had never shown any defiance before, drove our mother to madness. And my father is frustrated with both of them. Well, it seems like all three of them are experiencing a picture-perfect kind of unhappiness. As for me, everything has been going smoothly since I left home. Work is still enjoyable, and my personal life is thriving. Recently, I've been discussing the future with the man I've been dating for a while, and it looks like we might get married in the near future. If we have children, I want to use my parents as a bad example and ensure that I shower them with unconditional love equally and create a warm household.